All right, we're going to go ahead and bring this meeting to order. We're lacking a quorum, but we'll come back to the minutes afterwards. So we'll go ahead and move into our first presentation, which is by Pamela Whitman-Taylor, Office Director, Foster Care Ombudsman, Office of Inspector General, West Virginia DHHR, regarding the overview, the purpose of an ombudsman. Go ahead, please. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning. Good morning to all of you. I was asked to speak to you today about the function and the structure of ombudsman. I took the liberty in this presentation of adding information that relates to the ombuds profession in a corrections and adult corrections environment as well. I hope that the information I present today is helpful to you. Next slide, please. So the first slide that I have for you is entitled, "What is an ombudsman?" And I won't read to you, but I will tell you that the operating definition that is at the top of the slide is the one that is most notable to describe a government system-based ombudsman. But I do want to let you know that ombudsmen are present in all sorts of environments, also outside all levels of government. And that includes business, nonprofits, large companies, small universities, healthcare organizations. So the ombuds profession is present in a variety of different environments, but particularly prominent at all levels of government. We're considered an alternative form of dispute resolution, and the Swedish word ombudsman means representative of the people. I was just kind of joking mildly with someone a moment ago. There are all sorts of different ways to pronounce ombudsman. Several of them are considered more correct than others, and only because I've repeated it in this job so many times do I usually strike it right. Ombudsman is old but not well known, but most would agree that anyone who is dependent on others and on government 24/7 is highly vulnerable by nature. And although there's not necessarily overwhelming sympathy at times for incarcerated people, they do have rights, and it is in everyone's interest to ensure that those rights are protected. Next slide, please. So this slide is a bit of history. I don't want to go overboard on the history piece, but I also know that many in our legislature are new. So I will review this briefly. We were established by the West Virginia legislature in mid-2019. I started in this job role in early November of that same year. I've put on the slide the various House bills that are related to our enabling legislation and legislation that has subsequently added to and clarified our duties and responsibilities to the people of our state. The Foster Care Ombudsman, of which I am the director, is intended to provide a means by which people can basically obtain assistance when they don't know what to do, don't know where to go, feel frustrated, find that they don't understand a complex system that they are interacting with, either because they are being served in it or served by it, or quite frankly, it is the office that people will call when they are afraid. We were originated back in the time when it was all of the discussion about what was something of a controversial potential transition to managed care insurance for the foster child population. So House Bill 36, it should say 3061, I just caught my own mistake there, was effective in February of this year, and it made some changes to our existing statute. It clarified and improved it, in my opinion, and I'm grateful for that. But right now, the Foster Care Ombudsman receives, investigates, and resolves complaints that basically relate to the child welfare system, as set forth in the slide, if there is an action, inaction, or decision of any state agency that is involved with the foster care population, it is typically within our jurisdiction to help our public with that issue. The statute that we have now that was recently improved by 3061, and again, I apologize for that error, is considered containing virtually all of the model statute for ombudsmen around the country. So I'm really very pleased with the statute that we have that currently governs the office that I am responsible for. Next slide, please. Continuing a little bit of history here, these are just some of the changes for your information that were created at this year's regular session. We are now responsible for any child, not just a foster child, who dies or sustains a critical incident in West Virginia. A child in West Virginia that is in the juvenile justice system, and there are some reasons for that, and a child who may be subject to a report of alleged abuse or neglect. We also are now protected in terms of having to be compelled to testify or produce evidence about our casework. And the reason for that change is to actually provide some delivery on the promise that we make of confidentiality. There was a gap there that needed to be closed, and this past session that was achieved. And again, I appreciate that improvement. I put on this slide here that to date we've amassed a formidable body of data, but as of this morning, the total number of complaints received by the foster care ombudsman team is 1,834. And we talked to hundreds and thousands of people overall in meetings and panels with relationship to investigating complaints and helping people. So it's a busy office. One of the things I didn't put on this slide, a very important part of what we do is we substantiate or validate complaints that are validatable that come to our office. And we keep track of complaint validity by topic and by county. And we are working hard to attempt to map that so that drilled down to a county level, that information can be used constructively by leaders and lawmakers for problem solving. I made some notes here that our greatest challenge currently is to create truly usable information for leaders, lawmakers, and stakeholders, given that we have now collected such a large body of data. We continue to use what I call a souped up spreadsheet to capture everything that we do, but we expect to convert to an appropriate case management system in the near future that is specifically designed for investigatory and ombudsman programs. So yes, they do make that kind of technology for programs like ours that do this kind of work. As soon as we can get things where we want it from a data presentation perspective, our next annual report, which is admittedly somewhat delayed, will be out very soon for your consumption. Next slide, please. I wanted to make sure I shared with you a little bit about the organizational development of the Foster Care Ombudsman Office. And of course, I was the inaugural employee and for the most part worked by myself for a little more than the first year. I had some clerical help because I started right before COVID. So for about the first year and a half, my task was to develop the office infrastructure, and I started taking complaints at day one of my employment. I had the ability to do so, and I felt that our program would be improved if I developed it to conform to what people were really asking of this brand new office. And I'm really glad in retrospect that I approached it that way. But I certainly didn't do it alone. This office was developed with information generously provided by all of the different organizations that you see here on this slide. And there are now ombudsman leaders and directors, not only around the country, but around the world, who've now become something of my best professional friends, share information freely about lessons learned, what has worked, maybe what has not so well, and we pull all of this together in order to create an effective program to serve the people of our state. In addition to these types of resources, I also combine that information with my own decades of corporate auditing and consulting experience in for-profit and nonprofit organizations around the country. That has helped too. Next slide, please. In terms of organizational design and response, if you did not know, we are positioned currently under the Department of Health and Human Resources as one of several units within the Office of Inspector General. But we will be moving over with the OIG to the new Department of Health when that becomes effective officially early next year. Currently, we are staffed by myself as the director, a deputy director. We have 8 regional ombudsmen. We have a research specialist. We will have an administrative secretary. We'll be posting for that position again soon. And we also house graduate students, MSW, Masters in Social Work interns, when they choose to work with us and we believe they have what it takes to intern in a unit like our own. And that's been very helpful. We accept complaints by phone, email. We have a guided Google form that can be accessed through our webpage, fax, letter, and we can see people in person, not only at our office, but out in the community all over the state. If I haven't mentioned it, our workforce is positioned all over the state. We are not Charleston-centric. We are throughout the state so that we can have that presence wherever we may be needed. Our response is not something defined by a policy manual per se. Ombudsman work by its nature is very highly customized to the complaint, the complainant, and the relief that they seek. So everything that comes into our office is handled in a slightly different way, although we do have operational standards to which we adhere, and we keep very close track of the work that we do. Complaints in our office, and this is quite typical and actually very competitive with other ombudsman programs around the country and around the world, is most complaints are closed within about a week or two, and more complex situations about a month. Full-on investigations would take longer, but we don't do that many of those, and so I did not cite those numbers here. Those could take anywhere from several months to longer than that. I'd like to point out to you that our unit is quite efficient. We make extensive use of the Google Workspace in order to collaborate meaningfully, our remote team, and to communicate with others outside of our office. You may notice we do not position our people, our personnel, within DHHR offices, and that is by design. Ombudsman best practice does not locate offices or people within the locations of those over which the Ombudsman has investigatory authority. We are not positioned in DHHR offices, but I will say that we do try to regularly visit them, and we engage in very rigorous outreach to any and all of our stakeholder locations all over the state, and we visit families and kids when that would be prudent to do. Next slide, please. So I would kind of like to shift over a little bit to the potential value proposition of ombuds and its possible application in a corrections environment. Now, you'd hardly expect an ombudsman to get up here in front of you and sell short the ombudsman office and its value, so I don't want to disappoint you there. But I did want to make sure I included the word potential, because it isn't necessarily an appropriate office for all circumstances and all settings, and sort of an ombudsman's organizational position has a lot to do with how effective it can or will be. So I put potential in there as a deliberate word in this presentation, but let me run through a few of these. Ombudsmen have the potential to mitigate organizational risk and loss, and that can be economic or non-economic. We can provide early intervention and early warning. And as you know, I'm sure just from your experience, that earlier that you attack a problem, the less costly and the less controversial and the less time consuming it is likely to be. So low-level intervention and early warning systems to mitigate risk is what ombudsmen are really known for. We provide a certain independent perspective toward improvement because we're not involved in a system. We sit outside of it. And you know, one of the things that we do that many people don't know, ombudsmen like to validate adherent or compliant performance. You know what that means in real terms? When we see good work, when we see compliance, when we see adherence to law and applicable policy, when we see people who are behaving selflessly to help and serve others, we call that out all day long and twice on Sunday. And leaders, managers, personnel, they really like that, and that helps them better tolerate when we need to come and level something of a criticism. We also are sometimes considered a unit that people will enjoy because they can kind of offload complaint handling, dealing with complaints and complainants to our unit like ours that is especially capable to handle those things, because complaint handling is time consuming and it costs money, and for some, complaints are unappealing indeed. The people that come into our unit enjoy the opportunity to de-escalate and to be able to truly help people who are frustrated up to here, to see how we can give them education, context, and empower them to help solve problems in systems they often don't understand. We protect citizen redress. We provide lots in ombudsman work, anywhere you practice it, education to reduce people's frustration, meaning that sometimes you can talk to people, provide them context. In the corrections environment, corrections-based ombudsmen or ombuds who do corrections work provide a lot of context about applicable policies and laws to family members and significant others who call and complain about the incarcerated person that they care so much about. We do that so much, and it really hopefully reduces frustration. We also are uniquely able, because of the data that we collect that is so rich, to identify trends and patterns that others may not be able to see. And so that is something that I think is of value. From an economic perspective, anecdotal information suggests that organizational losses in the form of the Section 1983 types of civil lawsuits that are often pursued or filed by incarcerated persons may be reduced by the presence of an alternative dispute resolution resource like the Ombudsman. Next slide, please. The next slide, which I know you have the presentation with you, so I will not get into detail here, outlines the essential characteristics of an ombudsman and the way it executes in best practice. And the reason I wanted to put this slide up here for you is to help you differentiate between an ombudsman and a customer service representative. We certainly provide customer service, but because of the nature of our essential characteristics that are all the four very important legs of the table, we are a unique utility indeed. I put here in my notes that independence is the most difficult characteristics to attain, but extremely important, and confidentiality is the most difficult at times to defend. However, confidentiality is incredibly important because people disclose very freely their perspectives, their experiences, if and when they know that that information will not likely be shared with others. We administer satisfaction surveys to virtually all of our complainants shortly after a complaint is closed at the Foster Care Ombudsman Office. And although our overall satisfaction reported back to us is actually very high, where we score the lowest is in the area of independence, due in part to our formal affiliation presently with the DHHR. But to be ensured complete confidentiality in casework is very important. The important check on any ombudsman power is that what an ombudsman can do with information that we obtain is by necessity limited. It has to be. That is a check on our power and authority, and I will show you the next slide to explain. I call this, I think others have called this, I can't coin the term, the ombudsman paradox. These are the things that you can see on the slide. I won't read them to you that ombudsmen do, and do not. I will confess in any ombudsman environment that what we cannot do, the things in the do not column, oftentimes are the single thing that is frustrating to complainants. But we try to manage expectations by explaining our role and our authority early and often. It is said that ombudsmen have the power of a pen, a flashlight, and publicity. Most often, when an agency has provided information from us about an error, an omission, or a deviation from applicable law and policy, what we find most often is that agency personnel are typically, when given the opportunity to do the right thing or make something better, they usually do take us up on that. But if that's impossible because the water is under the bridge on the particular issue or error, usually we really try hard to encourage them with recommendations to prevent errors of the same nature from happening again. So that's really the way we work with the powers that we do have. The next slide, if you will advance it, please. In order to prepare this presentation for you, I had the pleasure of talking to approximately 10 of the leading ombudsmen who worked in corrections from around the country. And on the slide are some of the different characteristics that they shared with me about their work in particular. Now, on the top in Iowa, Hawaii, Alaska, and there are several others, those are ombudsman offices where there's one ombudsman office for the whole state, and they handle complaints about any state agency. On the bottom, I cited an example of the state of Minnesota. There are a couple of others that have an ombudsman office set up just for adult or adult and juvenile corrections. By and large, those offices operate very, very similarly to ombudsman standards, but organizationally, they're just set up a little bit differently. I put some characteristics of those offices on here for you. Of note, I just did want to mention the ombudsman office in Minnesota that does just corrections. They have 5 FTEs there and a $663,000 annual budget. For reference, we have approximately 12 people in our unit. Our budget is $979,000, and state fiscal year to date, we have spent approximately just under $600,000 of that. So we really do take pride in being a value-added unit and operating efficiently. Another thing to mention I have in my notes you might find interesting is the Ombuds in Minnesota shared with me that the budget of her office accounts for 0.1% of the Department of Corrections budget in Minnesota. I just thought that was interesting and that you might want to know. Next slide, please. We're nearing the end here. Some other special considerations, special issues that do relate to the ombudsman type of service when it is utilized in a corrections environment. The most common complaints, as you can see here and probably would expect, involve general health and safety concerns, access to health care, being dissatisfied with the grievance process, discipline, segregation, outside communication, and assaults. And those typical types of common complaint themes were very common among every one of the corrections ombudsmen that I talked to, and also evidence themselves in the various types of reports that are generally available to all of us on the internet about their work. Ombudsmen in corrections use a variety of very different approaches from office to office in order to basically ensure that it is used but not abused. And that includes limiting inbound call time to say 15 minutes, requiring the completed grievance process be done before the ombudsman for corrections can be used, requiring written complaints. I don't know that I love that one, but I have one office that says they only accept complaints from incarcerated people in writing, disallowing time accounting, cellmate, and mail and property related complaints. So the structure of statute and the structure of the different procedures can help make sure that the ombudsman is doing more of the sorts of things that truly will be of helping nature. Confidentiality and independence are very key attributes. But there are exceptions in the corrections environment, the same way that there are exceptions in the foster care or child welfare environment. And that is if any ombudsman were to hear that someone is making overt threats of danger or harm to others, or were to make a very clear statement of intent to harm oneself, then that would, of course, be an exception to confidentiality. And the people that work in corrections ombudsing are the same kind of people that work in any other type of ombudsing, which is dominated by social workers, attorneys, law enforcement, sometimes nurses. There are others, and there are some ombuds around the country that do work in corrections that will hire people that were formerly incarcerated, but all make the exception not to hire felons for a variety of reasons. On the next slide, if you could advance for me, please. I provided to you some different reports from some of the different ombud systems around the country, and then I point you particularly to the Virginia Department of Corrections Ombud study. I was impressed that it is fairly recent, and it is a study that was undertaken by the state of West Virginia as they too were evaluating whether or not to potentially have ombuds include responsibility for the adult corrections system. And I believe that brings me to the conclusion of my presentation, and I hope it was helpful to you.
Very much so. Thank you, Director. Do we have any questions? Elliot Brett.
All right, thank you. A couple of years ago, this is before Delegate Pat took over for overseeing children and families. So this is maybe a little bit dated, but nonetheless, one of the concerns I used to hear a lot about with the system of CPS was with regards to placement or lack of there being any kind of placement of children with kinship family placements. Do you hear any kind of complaints about that right now? Are you hearing anything about that? Because I mean, to me, that's a very, very important issue. I think it's important that whenever possible, we should be placing children with relatives when CPS is involved. So do you hear many complaints about that right now? And if so, do you have any kind of statistics on whether that's actually happening?
We do have abundant statistics. Of course, I don't have them here with me, but we'd be happy to provide them. And I can assure you they will be incorporated into my next full-fledged report. What I can tell you is that West Virginia actually is a leader nationwide in the proportion of young people, foster youth, that are placed with relatives. So that's a good thing. And the complaints around that subject matter appear to be lessening with time over the last 3 years that this office has been open.
Okay.
That said, when we do receive complaints about that, and we do, it typically is from relatives who the department did not see fit to place the child with them. And there are a variety of reasons why that might actually be a good and appropriate decision, and there are some reasons why it may not. What I think ends up happening is when family or anyone are not selected for placement of a foster child, what would probably benefit them greatly, even if they don't agree with it, is to understand why. And so what we see sometimes as a shortcoming there is maybe a discomfort in having the difficult conversation with someone about why the decision was made not to place with them if it was an active decision. So somewhat of a complex topic, but we are seeing a reduction in complaints along that in an aggregate fashion.
Well, that might be why I'm hearing less about it. This was
Yes.
a few years ago that I was
Yes.
hearing about it quite a bit.
We are too, so corresponding there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions?
Thank you. Couple of things. So you have a staff of around 12,
Not
possibly an
full
intern,
staff, but
whether or not you have an intern.
Yeah.
8 of those are in the field.
yes,
Is that enough to handle the amount of calls?
I would say right now, yes.
I've heard a statistic, West Virginia, the courts in West Virginia are the fastest to remove a child. Have you heard?
Well, I mean, I am very well aware of the NPR or the ProPublica research that resulted in a news article around that topic. Yes, the statistics would appear to support that termination is more frequent in West Virginia than in other states as an outcome, and that it possibly may occur more quickly when it does occur. I have actually just joined with a group of very interested persons around studying that in detail, because I think we have something to contribute to that with the court improvement program, and we had our first meeting last week. I really want to dig into that subject as well.
And about the court improvement program, you get calls from parents or grandparents in a lot of cases, prior to the hearing, like looking for ways that they could make that improvement so the child's not taken and not put in an already overcrowded system. Are we handling calls like that as well?
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. And just to kind of elaborate on your point of it, Delegate, if it wasn't stated earlier, I don't think I mentioned it. Our office, even though it was originated to serve foster youth and foster parents, and then of course kinship parents, we take calls from anyone served or affected by the child welfare system. And many of them, including biological parents who are in the system, non-placement relatives and non-relatives. We talk to attorneys, guardian ad litems call us. We've had judges call us. We have community citizens who are concerned, therapists, teachers, CASA workers, community-based service providers. One of the benefits of our office, any office that does ombudsman work, is that you get a really nice cross-section of people that call. You may not be able to serve them equally depending on what it is they want and their role, but we really enjoy being able to help everyone with a very complex system. You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think maybe or so if you receive a complaint from a child or someone on behalf of a child, is there any conflict with your jurisdiction and CPS jurisdiction, because CPS is supposed to investigate any alleged abuse regardless of where it is? So is there any conflict in that regard?
No, Delegate, the reason that there is not is because we do not do primary investigations of abuse or neglect, whether that occurs in the community or occurs in some kind of a school or facility. We are not the primary investigators. What we do is investigate the investigative work of others. So there is no conflict.
And the bills that were passed created your office and tweaked it earlier this year, I guess. Do you see any need for any further adjustments?
It is probably too soon to say. What I can tell you is that there were many adjustments that were made this year, and I'm very pleased with them. They will ensure that we truly are able to do the work that I know is the intention of this body. You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much for being here. I have quite a few questions. So you said you collect a lot of data, but it sounds like you don't know what to do with it or how to really process it. Do you have any intentions of hiring any sort of data analysts or communicators, or what's the plan there?
Well, let me tell you kind of what I meant by that. I would not want to leave anyone here with the wrong impression. So we collect not only demographic data about everybody, but we also collect information about everything that we hear, everything that we observe, everything that we find or conclude, and everything that we recommend or suggest if we do so. Much of that is in narrative, and parsing through all of that narrative to do appropriate qualitative study is very labor intensive, and we don't have a case management system that helps with that sort of thing yet. We expect the request for quotation to be posted soon. Fingers crossed that all works the way that it should from the procurement standpoint. What I'm getting at there is, with the data that we do have, we've got lots of charts, tables, spreadsheets, and numbers and percentages. But we want to really drill it down in a way that is so local for the issue and so local for the, what I would call, level of deviation from applicable law or policy, that anyone at a leadership or management level can use it to know what to specifically focus in on for improvement efforts. That involves typically using some different types of software applications for mapping, like Power BI, some of those sorts of things. We don't have access to that in our unit yet. We plan to in the future. We're still relatively young. But we have been borrowing some of the technology expertise from the DHHR MIS department to help us with that. But it's just been a little bit slow because kind of pulling together and separating out what is meaningful and helpful from what is just sort of interesting is a management decision. I want to do that well for you and everyone else who might use our data.
What is the MIS department?
Management Information Systems.
Okay. So what kind of software do you use now?
Just an Excel spreadsheet.
How do you keep track of all, what do you use for receiving complaints? What do your staff use?
We enter everything into, I should have said a Google sheet, but a spreadsheet, everything.
Is it like a form or?
It's a very large spreadsheet that is loaded with formulas. We type narrative, we have drop-down menus, we have all kinds of preset options, we have all sorts of things in there to do the very best we can with what we have to capture the kinds of data that is typically incumbent to an ombudsman office. We really look forward to being on software and having technology that's appropriate for the work that we do. Again, that should be coming soon.
Are you working with Office of Technology to protect that data in any way?
Yes, it's absolutely protected.
Okay. Okay. Okay, then a couple of questions about the complaints. Are you getting any complaints about, I've gotten these complaints, so I want to hear if you guys are too, about the foster care voucher only being accepted at Gates?
Yes.
Any ballpark or any more information?
I will tell you that I would say approximately a year ago, we were inundated with voucher-related complaints. However, that has really also lessened quite considerably in the more recent past. We don't receive very many. I would say if I were to look back the last several months, it would be less than a handful, or it was many, many handfuls about a year ago. I know that the department had done a variety of different changes. I stayed on top of those changes and how they were being implemented with leadership. So I do think that it's gotten better. If there are complaints about vouchers only being accepted at a particular store or two, I would suspect it's a communication error on the part of a well-intended but inaccurate employee sharing information. But if there was any validity to that, we would be able to find it and then help work with the local to help fix it.
I believe the complaints last year were because they stopped being accepted at, I want to say Walmart and
Yes.
JCPenney. So
Yes.
they are only at Gabe's now,
I
correct?
don't believe that that is accurate.
Okay, I don't know.
I
So
don't
that's
believe
what I'm
that is
trying.
accurate, and it may be different in different localities depending on what stores are available in different parts of the state.
Okay. Is there any way to know, and you might not know this, if those vouchers are being utilized?
Yes, I mean, when the vouchers are used, they go back for reconciliation to the department, and there is data kept on that. I can't say I've specifically investigated that, but in my experience, most of the time when a voucher is issued, it is easily used. They typically, unless policy has changed and I didn't have my eye on the ball, are good for about 90 days. So they don't have to be used immediately, although typically in the past they had to be used all at one time. But there's a whole new system for it now, and I think it's considerably easier for those who get them.
Thank you. The next question was about, did you receive a lot of calls about the outstanding payments? And do you have any information on that? When the payment system flipped over, I think while we were in session, and then people didn't get payments for a month or two. Do you know anything about that?
Yes, Most of the calls that we received, and yes, we did receive them, were calls from people who simply wanted to know, quote, what was going on, end quote. They just wanted to know the status and if there was anything specific that they could do. If I had to estimate, because I was aware of all of those complaints when they came in, I would say our office probably received less than a total of 15 to 20 complaints in aggregate.
And so when you do get calls like that, what do you tell them? I mean, do you refer them back to their case manager or what
What we
happens?
do when we get calls like that, if someone wants just general information about what's the process, what's going on, what can I expect, then we will typically answer them that. But if someone is calling because they want to know the status of their payment, they are indicating that they're in any level of distress, they want to know about alternate resources, we will help them with all of that. We go directly into the back-end systems at the DHHR and are able to access that back-end computer information and other information from any involved agency. So we would actually go right into the system, work with DHHR to find exactly what was wrong, and then do our advocacy internally to get it fixed quickly. And then we would report out the same to the complainant to let them know. You are welcome.
Question, Chairman.
I do, Mr. Chairman. I do too, Mr. Chairman.
Very quickly, please, we've got another speaker. We need to move along.
We don't hear this now. What you need is a data analyst.
Well, we have, I will tell you what our need is. We have a research specialist too, who is an individual that is outstanding, of course, in spreadsheet technology and data analysis. In fact, he is shortly to be a PhD candidate in psychology, and research is his emphasis. What we need more than that, however, is a system to work on to house all of our files, our documents, our data, because those systems are created to take what you enter naturally and convert it into the information and the visualizations that we need to share that are meaningful. That is on the way, we just don't have it yet.
So what I hope is coming from that is something like an annual report.
Absolutely.
Because if you keep it for 10 years, and you just say, I've got a massive spreadsheet of all kinds of data, and we don't learn anything from it, the rule of data is if you put junk in, you get junk out. So is it internal and external?
Absolutely. My reports, I'm very pleased that they will be absolutely public facing and well distributed first to you.
So what a law enforcement agency would do is they produce an annual report and say, Internal Affairs has revealed to us that we have this many complaints, this many of them are for rudeness, this many are for excessive force, this many are for inadequate investigation, whatever. And what we get in return is we understand where we need to train and where we need policy. And so please let us know how we can get that done. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, it's a quick question, I hope. Who does the kinship or the foster parents, if they're having problems with an ombudsman, who do they contact?
If they're having problems with
The ombudsman himself.
the Inspector General.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And if we could briefly return to the third order of business.
Rick. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rick, in a situation where you have a child that's a victim of a homicide by a family member, does that trigger any type of automatic review?
It does now.
Okay, and then that review will look into reporting system to see if there was failure within the CPS reporting system.
Yes.
Is that what the purpose of that review is?
Yes, sir.
And when you determine inadequacies within that system, how is that approached?
Well, that would be not only addressed with the Department of Health and Human Resources, but also going forward, maybe something, as long as confidentiality doesn't preclude it, that could be shared externally. Because if we don't learn lessons from when bad things do happen, I don't know how otherwise we could get better.
And this may be out of your scope, but when these reports come in, say we have a specific child that's determined not to be anything that needs to be followed up on, are those reports categorized in any way so you can go back and see if we've had 5 or 10 calls about this specific family, there was never any action taken.
I don't know if they are categorized by the Bureau of Social Services specifically, but when we go in and do our investigatory work, we have access to all of that information.
And do you know if, I know it's been a recommendation of this body in the past to report those phone calls, do you know if that's being done?
It is being done.
That's fairly recent, I take it.
I believe that was implemented, that was implemented a couple of years ago in the month of October. I don't remember the exact year. What I don't know is how long that call information is preserved.
Thank you.
If we return to the regular business,
Mr. Chairman, I move that the minutes of the April 18, 2023 meeting of the Standing Committee on Government Organization and Committee on Government Operations.
motion is on adoption of the minutes. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those nay. That's carried out. Guys do have it. It's our adopted. Thank you. All right. Appreciate our speaker there, and we will move on to presentation by William Marshall, Commissioner of Division of Corrections and Rehabilitation.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, committee members. I appreciate the opportunity to present today. We have a lot of things we'd like to go over with you, and this time I'd like to introduce my executive officer, Mr. Brad Douglas, for Division of Corrections Rehabilitation. I failed to mention I'm William Marshall, Commissioner, NCR. And thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Douglas, and I'll take over and offer our presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
I've been looking forward to this because I get to talk about some parts of the Division of Corrections that I don't get to talk about very often. Some parts we're very proud of. So I'm going to tell you today a little bit about various ways that inmates can seek a remedy to an issue, complaint, a concern, a grievance, whatever word you want to put on it. And we have multiple pathways. I want to tell you a little bit about those. The first is our inmate grievance procedure. It is our general administrative remedy procedure. And the reason why that's important is there's laws on the books, and I'm not a lawyer, but there's laws on the books that prevent inmates from filing lawsuits unless they've exhausted administrative remedies. So what that means is they have to exhaust our grievance process before they can move forward with a lawsuit. Inmates are educated about the grievance procedure upon intake through an inmate handbook. Each grievance is logged. Grievances have 3 levels. So the level 1 is the inmate fills out their grievance form and they send it to their unit manager. So they get a response from their unit manager. There's time frames involved here. I can't quote them all, but there's time frames involved for how long people have to respond and all that. If that grievance happens to be about a healthcare issue or an ADA issue, the unit manager has resources that they can confer with about those topics, either their facility healthcare administrator or their facility ADA coordinator. If an inmate gets a response back and doesn't like what they were told or what the response was, they can appeal that to the superintendent level. Again, the superintendent has a certain amount of time to respond. They respond to the inmate's grievance. And then finally, the last level is the inmate can then appeal that decision to the commissioner. And at the commissioner's level, the commissioner has, as an employee, their designee that looks at those grievances and prepares a response for the commissioner that the commissioner then looks at and agrees with and signs and sends back to the inmate. Also at that level, we have a statewide DCR ADA coordinator that they can confer with. And we also now have a physician director, Dr. Amjad, which you all know. So she works with us now and she helps us with medical grievances. Grievances alleging or concerning sexual abuse, or those alleging imminent danger or violence, are handled in a different way. They sort of have a short circuit time pathway if the grievances are about those topics. So they just go right directly to the people that need them the most, and they can respond the quickest. So from January 22 to present, we have about 18,292 inmate grievances filed at level 1. 2,700 of those were eventually appealed to the commissioner's office. So you can see there is a lot of them. We're incarcerating about 10,000 inmates now at about 36 different facilities. So the volume is high. I want to tell you this process is time tested and it's robust. It's been in court numerous times over the years. As long as we do what we're supposed to do on our end and we follow our policy, things work out the way they need to. But we also have more. I want to tell you a little bit about our Bureau of Intergovernmental Affairs. We're very proud of this. This is new since consolidation. And within the Bureau of Intergovernmental Affairs, we have a group of employees called our Constituent Services Unit. Those folks take complaints, those external complaints from inmate friends or families, concerned citizens. It could be anybody. They also liaison with the governor's office of Constituent Services. Sometimes those complaints go straight to the governor's office. If that's the case, they're commonly referred back to us for response. Those are also all logged and appropriate responses. They're looked into by appropriate staff and appropriate responses are sent back to the complainant. In 22, the Constituent Services Unit answered 285 external complaints and about 170 general inquiries. Sometimes people that just don't know the question to ask end up with our constituent service. So that unit houses the folks that receive those complaints. It houses the commissioner's designee to prepare grievance responses. It houses our victim services manager, who provides direct services to victims' families in helping them navigate parole board hearings and things of that concern of whoever victimized their loved one. And we're very proud of that unit, and it's been a real feather in our cap since consolidation. We also have several what I call informal ways to address an issue. So inmates have regular access and regular interaction with staff. All day long, night long, weekend long, staff are there. They can talk to staff about anything they need to talk to them about. They also have regular access to the superintendent. Superintendent has expectations from the commissioner to be available to the inmate population. And that also includes regular visits from outside the facility. We have a group of leaders whose job it is to travel to those different sites and provide oversights to those facilities. They're also accessible to the inmate population. On top of that, inmates can write letters, and they do. They write them to the governor's office, they write them to the paper, they write them to everybody you can think of. They have the ability to make phone calls. They also have the ability to send secure emails to people that agree to accept those emails. On top of that, we have in our facilities, and this differs facility to facility a little bit, but I call it the inmate request process. There's a way an inmate can fill out a slip. It's called a request slip. And it could be, I don't really understand something, or I need help, or I need to talk to the counselor, or I lost my library book, or whatever could come up. So there's that process. On top of that, there's something called PREA. It stands for Prison Rape Elimination Act. It was passed in 2003. That federal law establishes a set of standards that states need to follow when it comes to the response to sexual abuse in a prison environment. So we had a confidential hotline called the PREA hotline that inmates can call and say, I've been victimized, or I know about somebody being victimized. Those are handled, referred to our investigation unit, and investigated and taken care of. Inmates also have unmonitored access to their attorneys. Those letters and phone calls I was just telling you about, they can send those to their attorneys without being monitored. So we don't have the ability to see what they're saying back and forth. All that, and want to talk to you a little bit about another section of our agency. We employ our own Inspector General. So, sorry, I'm behind one. There we go. So we employ our own Inspector General in our office. That position was vacant for a little while, but it was just filled just recently. And within that Inspector General's purview there are a number of oversight functions for facilities and our staff and our procedures. So there are routine health inspections from DHHR and from our own staff. There are routine fire safety inspections from the fire marshal's office and our own staff. There are another very important thing that we just got up and running last year is a system of policy compliance audits. So we have a group of staff that are trained to visit facilities and review DCR policies and make sure they're doing everything they're supposed to do. They provide a report to the commissioner on how compliant they are. We receive, in the jails, we receive visits from Immigration and Customs Enforcement because we house ICE detainees for the federal government at a per diem, and they come and inspect our facilities and what we do to make sure that it meets the federal standards for housing ICE detainees. Same thing happens with the U.S. Marshal Service. We house federal inmates for the Bureau of Prisons, so the federal marshals come in and inspect our facilities. Also, we have an internal investigation unit called the Criminal Corrections Investigation Unit, of which Commissioner Marshall used to be the director. So within that division, we have numerous investigators that when any of these things that I just got done telling you about rise to the level of a possible violation of policy or possible criminal violation, those are investigated by our internal investigators, a report is prepared and shared with outside law enforcement, which is typically the state police, and the state police do their own thing if it's a potential criminal violation. One more thing, and I want to mention this. This is something that we stepped back from a little bit during COVID, but we have long held a policy in the prison system of having facility citizens advisory boards. We have implemented that policy now for the entire agency to cover jails and juvenile centers. Those are getting started back up now after COVID. That's typically a group of concerned citizens in the community. It could be county commissioners or business owners or delegates or who have it. They come to a quarterly meeting with the superintendent and talk about issues of the facility within the community. They get to collaborate on that. Finally, on this topic, the committee asked for data related to our lawsuits and settlements. We just received some data from BRIM, so I don't have it ready for you today, but we can prepare something for the committee if you're interested. It's complicated and we just got it, so we're not sure we have everything we need or we understand it ourselves, but that's a very good question. So if the committee desires, we can put something together. Now, on to things that we talk about more often. So we didn't want to be in front of you guys with an opportunity to speak without talking about our most burning issues, which is our staffing issue. So as you know, we're under a state of emergency for staffing corrections. We currently have abnormally high correctional officer vacancy rates at multiple facilities. We have 8 facilities with north of 40% officer vacancy rates. Our overall officer vacancy rate is 33. But like I said, 8 facilities are 40% or higher. Our total vacancy rate for all staff is about 27 or 28. Those are very high. And last August, the governor signed an executive order to bring the National Guard into our facility. We have over 300 guards working on our facilities to this day. We've made a lot of progress over the past few years when it comes to starting salary for correctional officer or recruiting efforts. But as you guys know, I'm sure you've heard from all kinds of other places that they're having a hard time hiring and maintaining staff. So to this day, our starting hourly rate for the correctional officer is $15.75. We also recently implemented a $1,000 appointment incentive. You have to call it that. You can call it a bonus, but it's kind of a hiring bonus. And as of April, you can see there, we did it in October. As of April, we've hired 182 people, officers that have been paid that incentive. So 29 have resigned, but I'm cautiously optimistic about that. It seems to be happening. Next, I wanted to show you a trend line of our vacancies. We're up to 1,040 as of last Friday. But I want to show you this because I want to show you this 1813. This was going into consolidation, right? We consolidated the correctional agencies. We got across the board pay raise from the legislature and the governor's office, and we also increased the starting salary of correctional officers at that time. And the vacancy rate dropped like a rock. We could hire people and we were keeping them. Right here, it was down to 538, which is as lowest as anybody can remember it being for all three agencies combined. COVID hit us. And as you've heard from everybody else, COVID hit us all. Here we are where we're at today. So I already mentioned the National Guard, 300 folks are working facilities every day. We honestly rely on them. They're very, very appreciated. We also have officers from the DNR, not nearly as many, but we appreciate them as well. A lot of times they'll do a weekend shift to cover Central Patrol Force or something like that. So they're critical, and we appreciate the assistance. Finally, there's been a lot of talk for my entire career about the inmate population and our overcrowding situation. I wanted to show this to the committee. This is a little hard to see on the screen, but you might be able to see it better on the handout. What this chart shows you is, a year or two ago, our jails were just bursting at the seams. A year and a half ago, during COVID, we weren't moving people. It was a health hazard to do so, and our jails were just full and full. And our prisons started to get some room in them. You can see here as those numbers cross back in August, we've done a pretty outstanding job in the last year moving folks from jails into prisons to lighten the load on the jail system where most of our vacancies are and get those prison beds back full where they were. We still have a lot of inmates. They're moving all over the state every day, but our overall total population is down from before COVID. So that was a whole lot of information in a short time frame. Commissioner and I are looking forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your presentation. 2 questions, I'll give them to you both and let you respond if you don't mind. What would you attribute the near double officer vacancy rate from what you presented, 40%, I guess it's lower, to the 76% Potomac Highlands? And would locality pay help address that issue? That's number 1. Number 2, what's the impact of taking ICE and U.S. Marshal Service detainees on the reports of overcrowding, and is that a discretionary action to take those detainees?
It is technically discretionary to house those detainees. We have contracts with ICE and with the Bureau of Prisons to do that. I'll tell you from an overall standpoint, the number of those inmates is not overly burdensome, especially now that we're in a better place when it comes to overcrowding. Back when we were way higher, we were thinking about those issues more. We also charge the federal government a much higher per diem than we charge the counties. So I think it's $80 a day now we charge them. So I would also say there are benefits to maintaining that good relationship with the federal government. I mean, they have courthouses in West Virginia and need to house inmates. So while it might not be technically mandatory, we value that relationship. It's worth it.
So to address your first question, I was on a CLA meeting recently of the Correctional Leaders of America Association, and you talk about Potomac Highlands and Eastern Band, where we have a severe amount of vacancies with our staff. And the commissioner from Maryland was on there, and they got a tremendous pay increase, starting salary up around $55,000 with a $5,000 sign-on incentive. They've hired over 400 correctional officers since January 1st. And some of those were ours, of course. And you can't beg them to stay, you can't keep them there. Those areas that you talk about, Potomac Highlands, Eastern Regional, where Hutton'sville, the places that we really have severe vacancies. I think the locality pay would help for those facilities. What concerns me is the other facilities that we have that our people are working hard every day and they don't get the incentive to stay. So what's their reason for staying? And so that's one thing that concerns me. I do think it would help in those specific areas. But right now, our people still have faith. They still have belief in what we're doing. and they're holding on. I think a large part of them are holding on with anticipation of some help coming their way. And so that's the type of direction I would like to see. But those areas that you're talking about, our bordering states right now are a big competition for us. And it's a real competition, and it's hard to maintain it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the presentation. A couple quick questions. Back to the grievances. How many grievances did you have alleging or concerning sexual abuse or imminent violence?
I
Out of
don't
that
have those-
18?
I don't have those statistics with us, but we can get that. We could break down that number like that.
Okay, that would be wonderful. And then also, how many of those were granted or remedied in favor of the inmate?
We can provide that as well.
Okay. Next one, you said the inmates can make phone calls and emails. Do they still have to pay for those?
They do. They do not have to pay other than postage for a letter. But they are charged for a phone call and they are charged for it.
How much?
Cannot quote the phone rates off the top of my head. The email is cheaper than the stick.
Okay. Next one, the Citizens Advisory Board, did you say that's just for juvenile centers?
So that's for all facilities.
Okay.
We traditionally had it in our presence facilities for many years. Since consolidation, we've applied that policy to all our facilities. They just had to take a back seat during COVID.
Okay.
So we're hopeful that those will get rolling.
Okay, and so base salary for correction officer, $15.75. What is it for people that aren't correctional officers, like people that work in front or the other positions?
So that $15.75 translates to $33,214. Starting is the special hiring rate for a correctional officer one.
Okay.
We have many other job classes. We have many job classes that aren't officers. So a correctional counselor one starts at something like 26.
Are there wages that are lower than the $15.75?
Absolutely. The correctional counselor one starts at something like 26.
26,000.
26,000.
Yeah, not per hour, sorry.
Not per hour.
26,000 a year. Office assistants can start significantly lower than that.
Are there a lot of vacancies in those jobs as well?
There are.
We also depend on a lot of those individuals with our officer vacancies to stay in post for our officers. So you see the
Security posts.
Oh,
See
okay.
the dilemma that we have.
So the office people that are making $26,000 per year or lower are doing security jobs.
I brought
Now,
this.
while they're doing that, they get paid a higher hourly wage if they make less, but only while they're sitting the security post.
This wasn't part of your all saying that, but you all can see up here, I was at Huttonville last Thursday, and that's the roster board for Huttonville, and you can see it. You see the red? Those are all vacancies for officers. That's how many we have to work, and that's how many vacancies we have. This is our non-uniform. All the red are vacancies. People we don't have to do jobs. Yeah, Huttonville has over 1,000 inmates.
Are you worried about the safety of these people?
Absolutely.
Working, both the inmates and the people?
And let me show you something else, and this will tell you how much our people love us. Okay, this yellow here, that whole row of yellow, those are individuals that retired and come back as temps to help us out, because they know how bad we need them.
And how much are they making an hour?
They'll make a flat rate as a temp, which is,
I think $15.75.
I think, well, I think
we
it's,
pay them stainless steel.
I think it's a little bit more though, because we don't have to pay benefits.
Oh, well, those.
I think it's a little bit more than a starting temp, because we don't have to pay benefits. They're allowed to work, and scheduled the way we need them, as we can use them.
Okay, and then this map on this graph that's just this past year, yeah? Okay.
That's
Down here 22 and then today.
Okay, but the jail's number is still over capacity, correct?
It is a couple hundred above capacity.
And the prisons is, I would say, right around capacity?
It's actually lower than capacity right now. Like I said,
Okay.
we're moving that backlog that stayed in the jail during COVID into the prison.
We've been working on our classification to make sure that the inmates that we would move out of jail can fit in the prisons that we're sending them to. So that way we don't have any conflicts in regards to inmates versus inmates.
We may move some.
Are there a lot of facilities that have like massive overcrowding still?
Our largest facility with overcrowding right now is North Central Regional Jail in Douglas County. They have about 200 over capacity. That number has been as many as 450 at times.
But still 200 over capacity?
200 over, and we are working with local counties, prosecutors, judges, to move some of those inmates that normally go there from other counties. For example, Tyler County, we're working on moving Tyler County's inmates to say Northern and Moundsville, where we got some room for them to try to alleviate some of that.
200 inmates over capacity, 700 inmates, and what's the vacancy rate of that facility? Or, I mean, is it large?
It's significant. It's not the 40% range, but it's not insignificant.
It's gotta be, it's very close.
Okay, thank you guys very much.
I'll be quick, but I got a few questions, so thank y'all for being here. First of all, about the vacancy among the correctional officers. Now, in one slide, they didn't say, so of that, for lack of a better term, I'm afraid you called it, but the signing bonus, there were 182 that accepted it, and of those 29 have already resigned. Okay. Have you looked into, and I apologize if this came up during the committee on jails and prisons, I think yesterday. I'm not on that committee. Has there been talk about changing this, the whole pay rate? Like, instead of having it all at the front end, and this is what I've heard from people, we're not able to keep people because all the, it's all going in on the front end. So after 3 years, they're relying on us to give them a raise. And why not do it like it was done in the military, or based on rank or seniority?
Well, a few years ago, we based, I think Mr. Douglas had mentioned it, we got the two and two, we got $6,000 over 3 years.
Yeah.
And that was a good start. That was a good reason to stay. And you saw our vacancies really had dropped at that point. We were really doing well. Probably the lowest vacancies we'd had in 30 years. Okay, but when COVID hit us, the job is just very difficult to begin with, became even more difficult. We started losing those individuals. And so that put us where we are now. So we feel like, to your point, I think you got a good point. I think that, you know, if you broke it down again, some sort of a significant pay raise, and you could break it down every 2 or 3 years, I do think that would be a benefit. It would not only get you in the door, but it would give you incentive to stay.
So keep going and still reward the people who've been there a long time, so you're not losing
Sure.
more on the back end.
Sure.
So that's
And one thing we also got to realize is, you know, we got let's say a 15-year sergeant who's working his tail off, and you got a brand new person coming in that you're giving more money than what there's got to be a balance. There's got
I
to be a
wouldn't blame
balance.
them for quitting.
Well, there's got to be a balance, and if you all could get a chance to, I'd welcome any of you all, and I would meet any of you all to go through. I've been to 18 facilities since January, since I was appointed commissioner. And if you all had a chance to go out and see the amazing things our people are doing every day, you would be shocked. You'd be shocked. We have people that are so dedicated to what they do, and they really only stay right now because they love us, and that says a lot. And our morale is pretty good right now. They're hopeful. They're hopeful that they see new leadership, they see a new direction. They have hope right now.
Spread the pay raises out in the back end, so you're able to keep the seniority. Quick questions about the prison population and jail population. Now, in our regional jails, what we say the population is the percentage of pretrial. I know if it's after the trial, they're just simply waiting to either they're getting out or they're waiting to go into prison. But how many do we have that are pretrial and can't go anywhere?
Significant number. I'm sorry, I can't quote it, but I can get it for the committee, and it's not hard to get. Yeah. But it's significant.
And one last question. We passed a bill 2 years ago that would expand the qualifying. I think we passed it before COVID, then COVID happened and it kind of didn't really get implemented. It expanded the qualifying offenses for work release. Have we acted on that now since COVID has calmed down?
We are actually I'm glad you brought that up, because we're working with a program at the Capitol where we have employees working at the Capitol for the local police here in Charleston. So we're trying to expand on that. We're running out of qualified candidates for those positions. So we are trying to look at the classification and look at some different things. Matter of fact, I met an inmate at Huttonville last Thursday who asked me to look at his, because he was wanting to be on the work camp there at Huttonville. And so we are working through those things right now. We have our classification expert director, and we're working with her to see if we can get that opened up.
If I remember correctly, what the law says now is that you have a lot of leeway there on who qualifies.
Sure, and that's exactly what we're doing. Looking at their their criminal history, looking at the time that they've spent incarcerated. How have they been, how have they behaved, what programs have they participated in, have they participated in programs that allows them to receive good time, which is time off their sentence, all those things we factor in.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You already answered a couple of questions for Delegate Bushkin there. Some of the people that you mentioned that are leaving right after they're getting hired, they're going to the other states and everything. Obviously, that's because they accept the training and certification of our personnel. Do we accept other states? Sure. Training and certification.
Sure.
So if they already have it, like in Virginia, we can take them right in. So there's nothing that needs to be fixed.
Now, keep in mind that we're not necessarily losing just the people that just come through. We're losing tenured people. We're losing, I lost a superintendent at one of my facilities to the state of Maryland. I lost a regional director to the state of Maryland. We're losing people that's got 15, 20 years in. That also says it's not just the brand new people. It costs about $16,000, $17,000, $18,000 to train an officer. So we have since I came on board with Mr. Douglas's help and some others, we completely revamped the way we do our corrections academy, our training. So the 6 weeks away from home was a deterrent. It really was. So we have modified that where we can get them in the facility, get their basic fundamentals. Get them shadowing with somebody for a couple of weeks, then they'll go to the academy for some training, do some things virtually. That way it takes the burden off them and their families, because a lot of them don't want to leave their families. Most of the people that we deal with are adults that have children. A lot of people now are single parents. It's very difficult, so we're trying to modify that to make it more acceptable and fit their life better.
And then everybody's talked about better pay increase and locality pay, and everything's focused around money. Personally, I think that's like a Band-Aid approach. It's not going to fix anything long-term. So is there any one major change that you can see for fixing the long-term problem?
And I think you're exactly right. I'll tell you why. We have to make the job better. That's what we're working on. Money will last for just a little bit of time. They'll get used to spending that money, and then money won't mean anything to them. If we don't make the job better, then they're not going to stay. So we're working on making the job better. I'm getting out of these facilities. I want to talk to my officers, find out what goes on every day that bothers you. And most of those things are things that aren't fixed. So we're addressing our maintenance issues, because maintenance issues will make the job safer. It'll make things easier for the officer to operate every day. So we're addressing our maintenance issues. We've got several things. We've already got money encumbered. We've got bids out. We've got things that we're getting fixed. That's been the biggest issue. But you're exactly right, sir. The money will not fix it. It'll help, but we got to make the job better.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Question. With the sexual abuse and physical abuse complaints and everything, are we housing inmates based solely on biological sex, or is it based on what they feel their sex is? And are there additional problems if we're doing that?
So we have a transgender review committee. So the purpose of that committee is to review those cases and make a housing decision based off of everything. I will tell you that to this point, I don't have any recollection of us doing it any different than biological sex. But we do have a committee that reviews those cases one by one.
Anything else? Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
And is there any other business?
Mr. Chairman, I move we adjourn.
Seal on it. I've probably done that